Everybody, welcome to today's Practice Accelerator. We're combining the two now. So every other week, we'll be doing our Practice Accelerator sessions. And the opposite weeks, we'll be doing some functional med training. And sometimes it'll be some crisscross. Today, I know is our first day doing this, but we did, as a team, decide to move it to the later time so more people could be involved. So that's awesome. So today I want to talk to you guys about some of the different bacteria and pathogens that we'll find on the different gut screening panels. And sometimes you have to be really careful with this because if you're using diagnostics and you look at their website, hey, Dr. Ray, we're talking about just gut tests today. So when you're running these panels, sometimes even these websites, like they have practitioner resources on diagnostics. And then when we're looking at the GI map, some of these things as opportunistic bacteria, they're not updated. So they don't always have the most up-to-date research. So I always go in and do research on the different pathogens that we're finding because it's super important to understand what you're dealing with, especially if you have a case where you have someone who's symptomatic, they have some gut symptoms, and maybe the profile of their gut doesn't seem that severe. And one of your first indications that there is some disruption in the gut, other than their symptoms of, gas or bloating, distended belly, disruptions in their bowel movement, whether it's constipation or gas or some loose stool or intermittent, it goes back and forth. Maybe some people, there's a one bowel movement a day and they have low nutrient status in their labs, and you look at their gut, you want to kind of pay attention because you're painting that bigger picture. One of the first indications that there may be an issue is their SIGA levels. And SIGA is the immunoglobulin A. The S stands for like secretory. It's secreted. It's in the mucous membrane. When we're looking at the oral level of SIGA, that's the first line of defense. And just kind of give you a refresher, your immunoglobulin A is there for slowing down the antigen presenting process in the body. And so what we mean is anytime you're taking any kind of proteins, whether it's food proteins or chemicals, or even from the bacteria or pathogens or microbes that are even the ones that are normal to the digestive tract, this immunoglobulin attaches to those and it slows down the presenting process. Because every time when you're eating or anything's in the digestive tract, what has to happen before these proteins can move through the mucosa and into the bloodstream? What the body's doing is it is taking these antibodies, and you have all these immune cells, all these dendritic cells, your mature monocytes. And what they're doing is they're looking at this and they're going, okay, do we have anything that fits into it? Because these toll-like receptors, all these histocompatibility complexes, they're all made to kind of fit into these proteins and go, okay, it's like Legos that stick together and go, okay, oh yeah, that fits. That's supposed to be here. Okay, that doesn't fit. Is that supposed to be here or not? And there has to be this immune process that identifies these antigens and then says whether or not they're good to come in. Well, you can overload dendritic cells by having not enough SIGA. So if you have low SIGA, you overpresent and you can develop sensitivities or intolerances. Like this is like a food sensitivity or an immune response to an antigen or a protein without leaky gut, right? You can actually have these sensitivities without a leaky gut process because you have low SIGA. And on the other hand, if you have excessive SIGA, like it's too high, then your body can have an excessive immune response to something because it's overactive, right? So having a balance between SIGA in the upper digestive and the mucosa of the mouth and the nose and the throat, You want that balanced. And that's where your oral tolerance starts. And then in the digestive tract, the lower digestive tract, the small intestine, the colon, you also want to make sure that you have proper amounts of SIGA. And Siri's talking to me on my Apple Watch. Sorry about that. So so there's a really good research article, and I would definitely suggest sharing my screen with you guys. I would definitely suggest looking at this, called The Effects of Secretory IgA in the Mucosal Immune System. And it just talks about the critical role in the homeostasis between microorganisms, because this is also maintaining proper responses to our bacteria. Because one thing you can actually do is you can lose oral tolerance, and this is the oral tolerance pathway. You can lose oral tolerance to your own commensal bacteria, the good gut bacteria. We don't want to do that. So maintaining healthy SIGA levels. So getting plenty of proteins, plenty of fibers, a proper immune response. So if you see low white blood cells, that's never good either. But what it does is this article talks about the structure of IgA, how it works, but its main thing is antigen presenting cells of the dendritic cells, right? That's what that is. So if you want to really understand this process, this is a really kind of a good article to look at. So you have these mucosal cells that are called M cells, and in that you have in the folds of the mucosa, and they're part of these Payer patches, and the Payer patches are the immune patches within your gut that are producing these cells. And so you have a huge piece there, but it goes into and it talks about these effector sites. It talks about the functions of the SIGA, which are immune exclusion. So it actually helps pull things out and identify these different items that are safe or not. It has neutralizing properties to calm down an inflammatory response, like the surface protein of Streptococcus pneumoniae. So it actually calms that down. Also, it can neutralize like C. diff if there's good amounts of SIGA. Like that's like if your mucosal membrane, these are your circulating antibodies or your surface antibodies that slow down immune response, neutralize things. They help your body get rid of antigens. It helps your body realize what commensal organisms are. Like we said, we don't want to have an irregular response. So there's a huge piece in here of being able to regulate that. So you want to make sure that if that's off, you start suspecting, all right, this person could have some irregular sensitivities to things. I mean, they have a hyper response if SIGA is too low, or they have a sensitivity or an intolerance to chemicals and smells, to different foods, and it starts in the mouth. Remember, food sensitivities start in the mouth. So if people don't have good mucosa membrane, you need to be looking at the mucosa in their mouth, make sure it's not disrupted, make sure their mouth's not too dry, make sure their throat is healthy, their swallowing is good. But that's where their sensitivities are going to start, but you definitely want to look at those things. So those are like the first indicator that there might be some disruption in the gut. You can always look at the inflammatory markers. So there's like two other really common inflammatory markers that we look at, calprotectin and lysosomes. They're going to give you an idea if there's some inflammation in the gut. Sometimes they're not. Often you'll find blood in the gut, and that is a permeable membrane that's damaged, but you're not having an appropriate immune response. So you have to like put those pieces together and go, okay, let's kind of say it like a sentence. Like, we got blood, that means there's damage. Are we having an immune response? And if you're not, you need to start, like, you kind of dig into those things and go, okay, well, why is that an issue? The next piece that when we look at that is then to identify the types of bacteria that are in the gut. And lately, there's a few that I see quite a bit. And you'll find that you'll see some that are common, like one that we don't want, and these are all some of the ones that are common. So you'll see Klebsiella quite a bit. And Klebsiella is tricky. It does cause reactive arthritis, and you'll see it quite a bit. It does have a potential to trigger some autoimmunity. You can actually measure HLA-B27, which is like a generic marker with autoimmune process, especially like ankylosing spondylitis or some rheumatoid factor. But there is a molecular mimicry with Klebsiella that drives autoimmunity. So you don't want to have this in there because remember, our molecular mimicry is always to a protein that's in a certain amino sequence. So if you had an amino sequence, that's exactly the same. It usually has to be 5 or more aminos that is identical to like a pathogen. That also we have that somewhere that a very similar sequence of amino acids in our body tissue, we can get molecular mimicry if our body happens to make an antibody to that sequence. So that's always really important. So we get that molecular mimicry here with Klebsiella. We have seen this with a lot of different autoimmune. And you got to remember, if it's in there for one, there's a likelihood that you're going to see that. And you have a real potential there to create some issues for people when you have that going on. So you don't want to ignore it. You want to get rid of it. And you want to make sure that the person, you're doing some retesting to make sure that you've eliminated that because it can create a real problem for people. So remember that molecular mimicry process is it's a very common thing that we see. And you do not want to let something like that go too long. I'm going to try to find an image of molecular mimicry just to kind of like lock that in. But remember, it's an amino acid sequence. And a key note about that is that you have to have a full amino sequence in order to have an immune response. So you have to have a protein intact to have an immune response because your immune system only recognizes things of a certain size. And it just so happens that like an amino sequence of 5 to 7 aminos is big enough for our immune system to detect it. It has to be over a measurement of 5,000 Daltons. So if it's large enough, our immune system will see it. So if someone's digestion and make sure their barrier is intact, even their mucosal barrier, so nothing's getting in, the body, the digestive enzymes, the stomach acid, the bile, the pancreatic enzymes are strong enough to break something down. You're not going to have an immune response to it because it's broken down too thoroughly, right? So in the Dr. Karazian, that does a lot of stuff with Apex, in one of his classes, he has a really good breakdown of the amino acids. So I'm going to share a slide from that to talk about. So this is from the Karazian Institute. So up here, you see a full undigested protein. And if you have good digestive enzymes, stomach acid is the number one, then your bile and your pancreatic enzymes, you break this down into small amino sequences. And if it's a small amino sequence, your macrophages, those dendritic cells, they don't recognize this as a problem. But over here on the right, this is a non-broken down protein sequence. It doesn't fully get broken down, so it gets through, and here's a amino sequence of 4. Usually you'll see it like 5 or more, but you can actually have an immune response because it's not properly broken down. So undigested proteins is a really key piece to kick that off. And so if that sequence looks similar to anything in your body, you can develop an antibody to it if that's the one your body tags. So it's like a roll of the dice if people have leaky gut or if they don't have enough good digestive breakdown. But Klebsiella creates some molecular mimicry. So another one that we've been seeing quite a bit is Enterococcus Gallinarum. And you also see Galolyticus. So Enterococcus Gallinarum and Streptococcus Galolyticus. They're both not good. They both create an immune response. Gallinarum's actually been associated with some autoimmunity. This is from Wikipedia. You can see it can trigger an autoimmune response.
Hey everybody, Reagan Archibald here. I hope you enjoyed the Go Wellness show and maybe learned a couple things you could apply to your practice. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur who wants to work in an academic think tank with like-minded humans who are just like you, looking to provide better service, better quality of care for your patients, reach us at info@gowellness.com and we're happy to do a free practice analysis for you.